Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion video. This one is going to be all about Yoon from the Rise of Kyoshi and the Shadow of Kyoshi. So I suppose mainly known as the fake Avatar, the character who was thought to be the Avatar before it was eventually discovered to be Kyoshi. But he ends up becoming the villain in the second Kyoshi novel, and he just is one of the most interesting characters that the Kyoshi novels introduced. So I'm going to take a deep dive into this character here. We're going to go over his powers, his abilities, the kind of unique things that end up happening to him because of his encounter with Glowworm, and then also kind of going through his sort of history as a character, how he sort of changes from his early days on the streets of Makapu to being the Avatar for a certain amount of time, how the reaction to him not being the Avatar changes everything for him. He is a fascinating character to discuss, so let's pretty much jump straight in here with his appearance. We don't really get too much of a description. The Kyoshi novels aren't particularly known for being overly descriptive, but we do have, I think it's 2 images here of Yoon, just to give you a slight sense of what he looks like. And I think the main thing to say here with regards to the visuals on Yoon, of just, I think they did a good job at getting across the idea of like teenage earthbender who is distinct from our other 2 teenage earthbenders, Bolin and Haru. Given that like this is the earliest kind of in the kind of timeline character, I think they get across a good sense of like, okay, like cool, like there's an element of that kind of cockiness that comes across, but also that okay, slight edge of almost nobility there because he was thought to be the Avatar at some point. So not too much to like describe about the character, but I think it's a nice look, and I really appreciated that we got this, even though it was only in like the special edition of the book, only sold in certain regions. But we have it, it's online. That's what he looks like. So from there we'll move into his powers and abilities. Okay, so let's talk next about Yoon as a bender, and I suppose his power level, because I'll always say that to me, my interpretation of the books is that there is Yoon before he consumes Glowworm, and then there is Yoon after he consumes Glowworm. I do think him consuming Glowworm gives him quite a significant power level boost, which is why his bending seems so extreme and incredibly powerful in any appearance he makes after consuming Glowworm. Now, I've seen some people sort of disagree on that point. I want to know sort of, wait, why do you consider it to be that way? Well, for one, obviously, he eats Glowworm and gains the ability to dig between worlds. That's how he gets from the spirit world into the physical world. We directly see him gain that power from Glowworm. And sure, that seems to be the only kind of confirmed thing, but it straight away establishes that he is empowered by Glowworm. And typically the way, like, I suppose abilities work is that they're less specific, and it is more of just like he consumed Glowworm, so he gets a direct energy boost. That's why with Rava in Wan just gets a straight up energy boost. And this is to me, I view it as being a bigger spirit enhancement boost than, say, just a spear passing through someone, like what happened to Tokuga or Yao or someone like that. Him consuming him isn't just that he gets a fraction of the spirit's energy as the spirit goes through, but that he's containing at least some fraction of the spirit's power in him by eating him. And there's a bunch of examples, like the fact that he can liquefy Earth, and that's what he does to defeat Kyoshi when their fight is still one-on-one. He completely dominates Kyoshi once he gets serious. He just immediately encases her in Earth by using Earth liquefying. That's a skill we've never seen before. Then when he finally gets into a stance, a proper earthbending stance, when it's like 5-on-1 in this fight, he just immediately goes to town on everyone and starts taking them out. Jinpa gone from the fight. Wong and Kirima, legs broken immediately. And sure, he has to defend a little bit of dodge against Kyoshi and Rangi's tag team, but he does so and then immediately takes out Rangi, who is extremely powerful. And then, of course, we saw like he's more than a match for Kyoshi at this point. To me, that is just like, that's more than just he is really talented. He's going up against very skilled benders there at a huge disadvantage. And just the way the ability when he takes his stance is described, that he basically just has control of the whole area of Earth surrounding him and can make the ground like pulsate up and down like a wave, that it's dangerous to go anywhere near him because he can just take the Earth out from underneath you. That is not something we've seen benders really like do before. Similarly, some of the more subtle applications after he's morphed of just like the paint bomb attack that he does to kill Dairin and injure some of the guards, nearly kills Kyoshi with, is just him ripping Earth out of paint pigment. So a sort of control use of the power that he now has. And even that is very kind of cool to see. But again, what to me fully confirms it, when we go back to scenes of him fighting before eating Glowworm, he literally describes his finishing move against Glowworm, where he takes out the top layer of Earth, and when Glowworm is socketed in the tree, and this gives him the opening to like crush him down to the size where he can eat him. He describes that move as being a move that basically took everything out of him. It took every ounce of his power to do that, but that Kyoshi could have done a move like that easily. Yet, when we get to the final fight in Shadow Kyoshi, and he is after eating Glowworm, he can do power moves that are easily a match for Kyoshi. There does not appear to be a direct power difference between them in terms of what the magnitude of earthbending that they can do. Yoon is the one to bring the giant pillar of earth into the house that they both use. Yoon is the one dominating and controlling the fight with giant acts of earthbending. Yes, Kyoshi does her fair share as well, but it is clear that he went from just barely being able to, take out a layer of earth to now all of a sudden it is no problem for him to bring a giant pillar that they can both fire like hundreds of shots out of into a house, up through like multiple layers of floors and stuff like that. Probably the clearest example of this to me is one of his first appearances after eating Glowworm is back in the first book, when he appears during the fight between Kyoshi and Janju. They are both using their bending to try and control a rock in front of them, one of Lek's bullets, his last bullet. And if either of them gains control of it, they'll use it to kill the other. And so it's kind of stuck in the middle. They're both sort of cancelling each other out to a degree. They're both pulling as hard as they can to get control of this rock. Yoon just walks in, notices the rock there, and pulls it out from both of them. And the way it's described in the book, it's not a case that like because sort of Janju and Kyoshi were like cancelling each other out, it was easy for him to do. It's described as if like he literally was able to pull this rock out of the combined bending grasp of both Janju and Kyoshi with ease. And they just describe it as like all of a sudden they went from focusing everything on this one rock, this one spot, to it's just that like that thing was just sucked and pulled out of that sort of bending grip battle. And I think that in terms of direct bending power levels speaks to, there's no way he would have been able to do that before, but he can now. Now, I want to make the point that it's not that I think Yoon is weak before he eats Glowworm. I do rate Yoon very, very highly as a bender, even prior to being empowered by Glowworm. And the reason for that is because they do describe that he is a extremely talented earthbender and sort of, like the second coming of Karuk when it comes to his talent in bending and earthbending specifically. But also Kyoshi notes that his talent that sort of impresses her as an earthbender is that he is able to control Earth from relatively far away, and also have such extreme control over it to the point where he can make messages, like basically write by controlling bits of Earth to make, you know, sentences from distance. And then another example of this is when he's doing his firebending training with Heiron. He obviously can't firebend, so he gets frustrated, and what he does is he basically, using some dust, creates sort of a flame pattern out of the dust to make it seem like he's firebending. Again, it just speaks to like his talent as a bender before Glowworm was his control, but that he maybe didn't have the big power of a Kyoshi. That they're kind of opposites in that sense. Glowworm has, Yoon has all of the control, and Kyoshi has all of the power, and they both sort of don't quite have what each other lacks. But it's obviously more extreme, I suppose, in Kyoshi's case, where she barely has any control over anything small and can do big stuff, whereas Yoon still has solid power. It's just that he's a master of control. But I don't think that accounts enough for what he is able to do after being empowered by Glowworm, like the liquefying of Earth, especially the power level when he takes his stance is at. I don't view that as being something kind of possible that he could do without the aid of Glowworm's power. So there's some of the main points, like obviously I wanted to get across there, and that's why, like, using stuff from the book, to me it's clear enough there is a difference, and there's meant to be a difference. This is why Yoon is such a threat, why it is so important to take him down in Shadow of Kyoshi, that he's like devastatingly powerful. Like, let's not forget the fact that like his like introduction basically into the present day story of Shadow of Kyoshi is him holding everyone at that party hostage by holding everyone with their feet in the earth. And there's like hundreds of people at this party, and he did that to them all at once. That is not a normal earthbending level. That is not the power level of a normal earthbender. Like, could Toph in any way do that? Like, walk into a room with hundreds of people and just straight away like sink everyone into the ground up to their ankles and have control enough. He implies basically that if anyone acts out, he can individually target one of them and just like break their legs or something like that. It's on a whole other level, and I don't really see where there's an argument that is just his raw level. And if you want sort of a more ranking based thing, the way I view it is that Yoon before Glowworm is in or around Jeonju's level. Jeonju is the one who trained him, but Jeonju has the like experience and the sort of killer mentality that sort of, I think, puts him on like a slightly higher level. But Yoon at this point obviously has the talent, has the extreme control, much of the same training from Jeonju and all the assassination training as well, as we find out. But Jeonju has that as well. So the difference is basically Jeonju's experience versus, I think, Yoon's potential. And I don't think at this point Yoon is quite at the level where you'd say he's better than Jeonju. So I'd say he's maybe just slightly below or at the same level. And most people rate Jeonju as being sort of an earthbending equivalent to, say, a Tenzin or an Unalaq, which themselves are maybe not quite like, say, Boomy level as like the highest tier of the sort of normal benders that we've seen, but they're really good. So I still rate Yoon quite highly, as I think, you know, being someone who I'd say is like, say, a match for like, you know, 12-year-old Toph type thing, to Toph when she's like first introduced or something like that. I think Yoon probably would be someone who could challenge her. I think he's meant to be viewed as being that talented. Maybe Toph is a little bit better just because, you know, of the nature of her training, that she'd have a deeper connection because of her blindness. But that would be a very interesting fight, and that would be, I think, much more even than you'd think. I think Toph in her prime would be a level above like Yoon as we see him back then. But we of course will never really know what Yoon in his prime could be like, because he of course gets the enhancement from Glowworm, which, like I said, gets him the ability to tunnel between worlds, which he only uses once and doesn't really seem particularly useful in battle otherwise, but clearly has the effect of empowering his bending normally. And like I explained, that makes sense. He consumed a spirit. That spirit's energy is going to be part of him in some way. And from the simple example of the Avatar, merging of a spirit's energy with a human results in an empowerment of some sorts. So logically it makes sense. And then from his actions it makes even more sense. And you can see from the liquefying of Earth, the power level he has when he does his stances, the extra control he seems to have to be able to do stuff like bend paint pigment and so on. Bend sand, not sand, bend salt into like the melon yam field to create the message and so on. Unique applications of earthbending that we really didn't see him use before. Going back to Yoon before he is enhanced again, part of the problem is just that I don't think we never really get a full exploration of his ability level before he gets enhanced, because he fights Tagaka during the iceberg, but he only has a tiny bit of earth. And based on the aftermath of that, they kind of describe it as during the chaos of everything that happened, he sort of got like buried along with everyone else, and so was sort of out of action for most of that fight and didn't play as much of a role as you'd think. So it just kind of says that, okay, he was able to hold his own for at least a little bit against Tagaka in an environment that 100% suited her. But it doesn't speak otherwise too much about, like, okay, what does that mean? The two applications of his control I already mentioned, of him, like he's able to control the vase thing that Kyoshi's carrying from a distance, spell a message to her in rocks, the flame out of dust that he did. But then what it really comes down to is his fight against Glowworm. This is the clearest demonstration that he is really talented on his own. But I think you have to keep full context for this to not go overboard with how powerful Yoon actually is, because you have to remember that the glowworm that Yoon encounters is one who was gravely injured by Karuk. That Karuk delivered a blow to Glowworm that made him shrink in size multiple times. One blow to take a super powerful spirit and make him shrink not once, but it's implied to be like 4 times or so. That is basically something that like cuts his power level in half. And based on Glowworm's reaction and the way he interacts with kind of certain characters after that, it seems like he is much more cautious about dealing with humans who are skilled, which is why he doesn't particularly pursue fighting Jeonju during the spirit chapter, because I think he knows that Jeonju would be a threat to him. And obviously he underestimates Yoon, but ultimately Yoon is a threat to Glowworm at this power level that he's at. So you have to view Glowworm at this point as being a spirit who is very powerful still, but is a spirit who would be vulnerable against, say, either a group of standard benders or one very talented bender, which is what we see. So it's an amazing feat that he's able to defeat Glowworm like this. But this doesn't make him like the level of like an Avatar in the Avatar state. And I think that's maybe the mistake some people are making in thinking that Glowworm doesn't like empower Yoon, is that, well, he defeated Glowworm, so he's as powerful as a powerful spirit. But you have to remember Glowworm's power level has dropped greatly here. In addition to the fact that when he eventually defeats Glowworm and eats him, he's even smaller still. So if you want sort of numbers for this, I suppose the idea would be that Yoon, if he was to sort of somehow consume Glowworm at full size, it'd probably tear Yoon apart. If when the second he met him and he was the size of a wagon wheel, if he was to consume him then, it probably would have been a very similar situation to Won trying to take Rava into himself before the permanent bonding, where he probably could have kept Glowworm inside him for a little bit, but it would have like burned him out eventually, and we would have seen Yoon die from the energy overload. So he can only consume Glowworm once he gets Glowworm down to sort of a manageable size. And so the size of something that you can fit in your mouth is size enough to where he's going to get a substantial power boost, but it's not going to overload him like we've seen before. And I think that's the way to view it, that empowered Yoon is not the level of like an avatar in the avatar state, but it's in that range, because obviously it's one element empowered by a very talented bender. So I wouldn't say it's like half the power of the avatar state, but it's probably meant to be like something along the lines of like, say, a quarter or maybe even a tenth of the power of the avatar state, which may seem like it's a huge drop off, but that's massive. Like the power of the avatar state is insane. So any amount of that power that could be harnessed by a bender is something very notable. And I think what we see him do definitely feels like earthbending moves that the avatar state sort of could theoretically do. Again, the avatar state focuses more typically on direct, like, raw power in scale, whereas Yoon is more of a, you know, precision fighter using more technical applications, but still technical applications that use power. So that's the way I sort of view that, of like, the way they describe him defeating Glowworm is also, I think, another thing that highlights that he's more powerful afterwards, and that the moves they say he uses against Glowworm, again, it's not particularly descriptive, are just that like he starts off with this sky piercing fist, which is like a sort of uppercut of earth, which sort of starts the fight. And then they kind of just describe he uses like columns of earth, you know, hailstorms of like pebbles, like he sends a bunch of like smaller pieces of earth at him as like shrapnel and stuff like that. They're not describing like Yoon taking a stance, controlling the entire ground, and like taking Glowworm out in that way. I think the most powerful move they describe Yoon using in the fight is making a kind of hand, a big hand out of earth, and using that to try and, you know, slam or crush Glowworm, which, given that Glowworm is like the size of a wagon wheel at that point, a hand that would be big enough to squash a wheel like that isn't huge. And like that's one of the more powerful moves that he's potentially able to do, is kind of interesting to me. But again, compare that to the fact that he can bring like a column up through a house, control the area all around him, liquefy earth. To me, there's a clear difference. And I think you just had to bring everything we know about these topics together. The levels of bending that we've seen before, spirit enhancement and typically how it works. And again, with the way to describe it all, like, we know he gains a power from the spirit. Why are we trying to like argue that Yoon isn't empowered by a spirit because the book like doesn't directly spell that out, when it kind of does just through Yoon's actions? That like it would have been a little on the nose for the book to like literally come out and say like, you know, Yoon is enhanced, his bending is enhanced by the power of a spirit, but his actions clearly show that, in my mind. So that's one thing to note, that a control focused bender, but who gets the power later on. But you have to keep in mind, trained by Jeonju, who is a bender I think everyone rates quite highly after having read the first Kyoshi novel. Like, he's right up there, as I talked about already. So he has a style that is very strong, very powerful, unique, and he's also had like assassination training and just bending training in general. So he knows how to use his bending to win fights as well. And I think that's another thing that sort of puts Yoon over the edge, both in terms of his sort of power level before and after, is that he knows how to take people out. And that's why he is so dangerous in the Shadow of Kyoshi, and that they know he knows exactly how to use his earthbending to hurt people. And that's why it's so important for, you know, him to be defeated. And so when Kyoshi finally does it, it's a big moment. But again, another thing that gets across the significance of his power level is sort of how he eventually is defeated and killed. That Kyoshi doesn't defeat him in combat. Kyoshi realizes she finally needs to bring up what was sort of talked about to her beforehand, which was that you are going to need to address at some point the fact that part of the reason he is so upset is that you, Kyoshi, are the one who has taken his avatar hood away from him. You didn't mean to, but by you being the avatar, that is what makes him not the avatar. You need to address that with him. He may not have fully thought through how he feels about that fact because you were friends. They were both there during the big betrayal moment. He doesn't quite know exactly how to deal with Kyoshi, but throughout the whole book, all of the stuff he's been doing has ultimately been causing chaos in or around Kyoshi. So he's been sort of targeting her without really doing it, and finally she comes out and says it. And it is something he's needed. And it's the one thing that makes him pause, makes him stop fighting, stop thinking as much, and finally the emotions come out, enough to where Kyoshi is able to sort of put her hand on his chest, acting like she's being sympathetic towards him. The fight is done at this point, isn't it? He's shown he's defeated her. But she uses that one opening to immediately kill him with the technique she learned from Ottawa, and immediately freezing him solid, his inside solid. So it's another one of these situations where, like, a character is defeated, but for sort of more plot character-based reasons rather than achieving direct victory in a fight. In terms of, like, consistency-wise, Kyoshi's not going to be able to convince everyone to let her do that to them, put her hand directly on them like that. So it in a similar way to, like, the, say, Yukon family, bloodbending family of waterbenders, they're all taken out via basically, you know, more plot focused reasons of, like, Aang in the avatar state defeats Yukon. Tarlok is defeated by his more powerful brother Amon, who has the same abilities but more powerful, and then Amon is defeated by, well, Korra, you know, hits him a few times, but she doesn't defeat him in combat. He is defeated as the leader of the Equalists by virtue of him being outed as a non-bender to the whole city, but he is killed by Tarlok in the murder-suicide moment on the boat. That those characters were so powerful, you basically couldn't have a normal character just defeat them in combat. And it's the same with Yoon here. They treat him as being exceptionally powerful, and they give him, like, a plot-based reason for him to be taken out, rather than, oh, Kyoshi's powerful enough to just overpower him. That wouldn't have made a lot of sense. And I think that's another thing that, like, adds to this of, like, yeah, he's clearly empowered by Glowworm. So yeah, with that, let's move into his personality. So let's get into the personality of Yoon, as well as, I suppose, his history as a character. There are kind of 4 eras of his life. One of them is not too long, but let's start with the first one, and that is him as the boy from Makapu. So, of course, we don't get a detailed backstory of, like, the full situation surrounding how he sort of ended up like this, like we do with Kyoshi. But the significant part is that he is found by Jeonju in Makapu, and through that we basically get that the way he sort of survived on his own on the streets of Makapu was by earning money from people, by kind of, it's not quite a scam, but just showing off his Pai Sho skills, sort of like betting with people that, I bet you can't beat me at Pai Sho. You play normally, I'll play by just picking a random piece out of the bag, and that's the piece I have to play. So playing these sort of disadvantaged games and betting that, like, oh, people will take him up on that challenge. And he was just so skilled and confident at this act that that's how he managed to survive. And this is also how he was basically discovered, like why Jeonju focused on him, is that he recognized Yoon's talent at Pai Sho and connected it to that being one of Karuk's great talents also, that Karuk was one of the absolute best Pai Sho players in the world. And here's this boy playing just as well, similar styles of play as Karuk, that Jeonju had played Karuk so many times that there's no way he could misidentify that style of play. But it's not exactly proof that someone's the Avatar. And this is why, like, a lot of what we're going to talk here about is basically Yoon's dynamic with Jeonju. And a lot of it is ultimately on Jeonju for kind of creating the situation for how Yoon eventually turned out. Because this is a sort of more desperate Jeonju at this time. He really wants to find the new Avatar. The new Avatar is needed in the world. There's only so much that he can do performing the negotiations that are usually done by an Avatar with some assistance from his advisors. But Jeonju is in the position where he's having to try and do what he can just from his position. A high position, but he's no Avatar. And he really would like to be the one to find the Avatar. That was Karuk's, last request of his companions, was that they find the new Avatar. And they hadn't for so long. And they only find Yoon as the Avatar when he's like 14. So the world has been without an Avatar for 14 years. Plus a little bit extra considering, Karuk wasn't exactly active in the sort of politics side of being the Avatar for most of his, journey as the Avatar. So this was an important thing to eventually find the Avatar. And after so many failed attempts, Jeonju laser focused on Yoon pretty much just because of the Pai Sho talent. But of course, also because of Yoon's talent at earthbending as well. So he demonstrates the skill at this game of Karuk, but also a supreme talent at earthbending. And Karuk was an extraordinarily talented earthbender, as well as all the other elements as well. But this is the thing as we go into sort of the more present day stuff in The Rise of Kyoshi, the first book, is that Yoon demonstrates nothing that officially confirms him ever as the Avatar. He never bends any of the other elements or does anything inherently spiritual. It's just that Jeonju committed that, like, it has to be him. He made the decision that, no, the journey is over, it has to be him. And this decision from Jeonju is what creates the situation that will ultimately basically destroy and break Yoon and change the lives of Kyoshi, Yoon himself, Kelsang, all of these characters. Ultimately, it comes down to this decision to take this boy off the streets of Makapu on not the clearest evidence that he is the Avatar. And for Yoon, this changes his life. He goes from nothing, having to sort of fight on the streets and to get what he needs to survive, having nothing, having no one, to all of a sudden he's in the higher ranks of the world. He's like the most important person in the world. Everyone he meets gives him respect, wants to train him. He gets gifts all the time. It's a complete shift in world for Yoon, all thanks to Jeonju. But the thing that I think Yoon never fully grasps during his time with Jeonju is that Jeonju really only cares about Yoon because he is the Avatar. He doesn't really have that much of an attachment to Yoon as a person, just that this is the Avatar. I'm here to help and train the Avatar. And that's why Jeonju can so easily discard Yoon when it turns out to not be the case. But we're not quite there yet. Yoon then, as the Avatar, turns out to be a good pick because he adapts very well, as far as we can tell, to all of the training. Apart from the fact that he doesn't learn how to bend any of the other elements. He adapts well to the earthbending training, the diplomacy training, politics style stuff as the Avatar, and also the new type of training that Jeonju is doing to basically counter things so that what happens to Karuk will never happen again, by turning Yoon into this incredible fighter who has all this assassination training, counter-assassination training with the poison resistance stuff. So the Avatar gets trained in many, many more disciplines this time round, because Janji wants to make sure that nothing out of the blue is going to happen to surprise this Avatar. And obviously, as we get into the Rise of Kyoshi, Janji becomes more and more frustrated by the fact that as much as he's convinced everyone pretty much across the world that Yoon is the Avatar, he's done all these diplomatic missions, there's no direct full confirmation just yet. Beyond that, he seems to be doing a good job so far, but he's getting frustrated that Yoon hasn't bent any of the other elements, which is the ultimate confirmation. And so you get that moment in the book where, to try and almost force Yoon to do firebending, he's like, okay, do your firebending training on this spiky ground that will hurt your feet. That way you won't have much of a connection to the earth because it will be damaging your feet. But you'll have to find a connection to something else, potentially fire. And it's a desperate move to try and force him to do other bending. But it's putting Yoon at risk, and that Yoon's feet are bandaged and he has to wear these like big shoes in the days following this. But he trusts Jeonju, and I think that's the thing. He trusts him so much because this is the man who took me off the streets, gave me this amazing life. And Yoon is full steam ahead. He wants to be the Avatar. He's fully committed to the training and cares about it. Even despite receiving criticism from Heiron for like, you're just going off your talent, that's why you're not getting firebending, is because you think because you're talented at earthbending you'll just adapt to everything. And Yoon is frustrated by the fact that like his teacher thinks that he's not trying that hard, but he's putting his everything in to try and learn firebending, and that you find out that he isn't just someone who coasts on his talent. He tries with everything that he has. And he cares. And I think that's another thing that's gotten across really well in The Rise of Kyoshi, is that he really does care about trying to sort of change the world. Jeonju does as well, but he's been so sort of warped in a way by what he's been forced to do, having such an important role in the world while the Avatar's not been around. The whole Yellowneck uprising, how he's handled it, and how he's willing to go to extremes more often than not. Yoon still has some idealism and wants to be able to help the world in a way where, no, we can get all the hostages back. And that is such a key moment in terms of like, that is who Yoon wants to be as the Avatar. An Avatar who everyone can look up to and will try and help everyone. And so even though he's warned by everyone, don't try and negotiate with Tagaka and get too much. We'll ask for a certain percentage of the hostages, but you won't be able to get them all. But immediately Yoon ignores all of the advice and is like, no, I want all of the hostages. And he ultimately gets it. And Kyoshi, looking at Yoon make this offer, is so happy, proud that she is kind of like, this is my Avatar. It means so much to me that he put himself on the line like that to try and get all the hostages. And just the fact that he succeeds in a lot of these diplomatic missions. He has a good relationship with Fire Lord Zoryu, other world leaders, and they together, he and Jeonju, really are changing and shaping the world. Now, of course, there is this darker side to it with all the assassination training, but I do get the impression that Yoon, while he's aware of like some aspect of like how this is kind of weird what they're doing, isn't fully aware of all of this, which is why he is so taken aback and does confront Jeonju over the whole Gravedigger of Zulu Pass incident, and that he wants to believe that like, oh yeah, it was this honorable, respectful thing that he did there, but he can't accept that actually everyone else seems to recognize this as this like devastating act of brutality. And this is sort of where he begins to see some of that different side of Jeonju, the more cruel aspects of the training, and now all of a sudden he has this reputation that he's never told me about. He hears similar stuff about Heiron, of course, and Kelsong. Like, you see that he does have that idealism at this point, that the assassination training hasn't like changed him as a person. He still cares about people, wanting to be an avatar people can look up to, protect everyone, and be the ideal avatar. But he does suddenly begin to have his doubts. And when suddenly Kyoshi is a candidate to be the avatar, you can tell that there are some doubts here. He can't believe that after all this time he may not actually be the avatar, but he doesn't believe it for a second. Even though he says to Kyoshi, if there's anyone else that it has to be, I hope it's you. He doesn't mean it. And his reaction when he finds out he's not the avatar, I think tells you the whole story. He 100% thought he was the avatar. He bought into everything Jonju told him about the fact that he is the avatar. And this is the key point, of course. They go on the trip to see Father Glowworm to determine which of them it is. And then, of course, what happens is that Father Glowworm takes the blood from both and reveals Kyoshi's the avatar. And straight away, this is the key moment for Yoon here. Everything changes. This is a devastating moment. This moment breaks him from two perspectives. One is just simply the reveal that he is not the avatar. Something he really cares about, he's all for. And he finds out he isn't the avatar anymore. But I think more than this, at this point, is the fact that Jonju immediately abandons him. And it shows to Yoon he never really cared about him as an individual, only because he was the avatar. Just the fact that he discards him at this point. He defends Kyoshi to get her out of Glowworm's clutches, but he basically just sacrifices Yoon to Glowworm, makes no effort to get him back. Even though Yoon's like a talented bender, could be a talented diplomat even if they had to explain the full thing, Jonju's just done with him. His frustration about, like, finally I have who the avatar is, I'm not letting the actual avatar get taken, and if I have to sacrifice this other guy, fine. This is such a devastating betrayal of Yoon by Jonju. This is the key point for, like, the rest of Yoon's whole journey. The rest of his life, basically, pretty much all comes back to this moment, and he's not the avatar, but I think more importantly, utterly betrayed by Jonju. The person who you can, I think, tell he did consider as somewhat of a father figure. That maybe he knew that, like, it wasn't really that way, but he would never thought that this man who helped him so much would be the one to throw him away like that and not care at all about him. And so this is where a lot of his rage and anger comes from. That when we get to the end of Shadow of Kyoshi, of course it comes back to the reason I'm not the avatar is because Kyoshi is, and that Yoon doesn't really know how to handle that information, what to do with it, because Kyoshi is a friend, and Kyoshi was also sort of betrayed in the exact same moment. He knows that it was not a plot on her behalf to take being the avatar away from him. But because she is the avatar, he's not. And I like the complexity around that. That the simpler thing at this point for him is to deal with his anger towards Jonju. And we see that after this happens. He's taken to the spirit world by Glowworm. And we see this is the third section of Yoon here. This more broken, downtrodden Yoon before he gains some of his confidence back and lets his sort of anger be his drive going forward. You have this character who is just unable to accept that, like, he's nothing anymore. That all the sort of wealth in a way he had was because he was the avatar. And now, simply because he's the avatar, everything changes. Again, it's one thing that, like, Jonju betrays him, but, like, even if he gets back and they can maybe sort things out, what role does he have in things? That's how committed he was to all of this. And this is where, again, Jonju's lies of committing to Yoon as the avatar before it was ever confirmed, announcing him to the world, all these world leaders knowing Yoon is the avatar, it completely backfires, and now is this thing that Yoon has to deal with going forward, of, like, constant reminders that people think he's the Avatar, but he's not. And then having to deal with Glowworm here, that it's at this point he makes this like rift within the spirit world, pure anger towards everything, mainly focused on Jeonju, but everyone who created the lie that has now betrayed him. And he creates this permanent wound basically in the spirit world, purely out of his emotions, that even Glowworm sort of like stays away from. He is fearful of what Yoon's emotions could do. And this is, of course, you know, where Glowworm, once Yoon sort of calms down a bit, he taunts Yoon over the fact that you thought you were the Avatar, but you're not. You are nothing. And just Glowworm doubles down on everything that's just happened to him. You are just the impurity in the ore. You are nothing. And as it seems like what's going to happen, of course, when this chapter happens in the book, you think, oh, this is when Yoon gets taken over by Glowworm, and then it's this Glowworm through Yoon acting in the way that we see him. But no, he finds something within himself to fight back, to create some sort of a, you know, deal in a way with Glowworm. And this is very interesting in that he creates this kind of new version of himself that isn't fully Avatar Yoon, and it isn't fully the old boy from Makapu. It's sort of a mix of the two. The confidence in the abilities that he has now, combined with, you know, the street smarts he had from when he was younger, and more of a reliance now on deal making, now that he has sort of the official, you know, diplomatic deal making combined with the street smarts of it. And you see some of that performance side of things, being the showman, come back out here, and he begins to sort of like negotiate in a way with Glowworm. And I obviously initially Glowworm's like, this is when he says, you know, you are nothing. But when Glowworm goes to attack him, to consume him, Yoon fights back, and it's this realization of like, there's one thing that is still left me in the world, and that is my connection to Earth. It hasn't left me. It's still here. He can still fight, and he somehow manages to find the strength to have this giant protracted battle against Glowworm and come out on top in the end. That, of course, when they basically fight each other to a draw, Glowworm is the one to decide, why don't we make a deal here? He's worried. Glowworm is worried going up against someone like Yoon, that he could lose here. So he tries to create a deal. He offers Yoon the ability to, I'll give you my ability to tunnel between worlds if you bring humans to me to feed on. And Yoon agrees with the idea of, I'm going to betray him. And so even that is quite interesting, that you don't really view this as being this like dishonorable thing of like, okay, he kind of agreed to a deal with Glowworm, but not really, and you don't really trust Glowworm. So him going against their deal, quote unquote, isn't really a betrayal as such. But it's kind of interesting that this Yoon here, having just been betrayed, sort of does something similar to Glowworm. And this is what gives him the advantage here, is that he does that big move, takes all the ground out, all the slime away from Glowworm, and then eats him. And just that moment of sort of bravado and confidence, that's, you know, that mix of old and new Yoon. It's like, yeah, like imagine just like doing that. You defeat a spirit and decide, whatever, I'm just going to eat it. But the big thing here is that like at this point he's defeated Glowworm, eaten him. He's still not quite the Yoon that we see throughout most of Shadow of Kyoshi. We still need to see the development of where does the character who's willing to hurt and kill people, the character who previously wanted to help and protect everyone as the Avatar, how does he go from that to suddenly threatening a whole party of people, nearly killing Kyoshi, trying to hunt down Rangi's mother, Heiron? Where does that character come from? And I think that's what's so interesting about the final interlude chapter of the book, is that he tunnels through the spirit world into the physical world, makes his way back, and all he wants is a drink of water. And he makes his way into this town. Okay, there's a governor who controls the well. You have to have this special thing to get at the water. So, okay, he goes to some of the shops to try and get water from there. And he overhears some people talking about the fact that they're like the Avatar. They're respectful towards the Avatar. So he thinks like, okay, it can't be too long since Kyoshi was discovered to be the Avatar. There's no way it's public and everyone knows. I'm still thought of as the Avatar. So, okay, I'll use the name to get the water and go from there. Fine. Even though it hurts him to see himself discussed as the Avatar when he knows he's not, it's fine at this point for the most part. But the real problem comes when these people, without really even meaning to, make it far too difficult and say the wrong things to Yoon at the wrong time. And him at this point where, again, that rift in the spirit world that represents his feelings on this topic, it's still an open wound. He still could go either way on it. They end up inadvertently being the people who make it so that that wound is never going to close. They're not really responsible. It's Jeonju who's ultimately responsible for this in the end. They just happen to say the wrong thing at the wrong time and make the wrong move. Offering him the water, if he can waterbend it just to show that, okay, boy in Earth Kingdom clothing claims to be the Avatar, he can obviously earthbend, so if he waterbends, he's the Avatar. Makes sense from their point of view, but seeing it said in such a way of like, here is direct proof that this thing that would have been easy for him at any other point in the last while now is the most difficult thing in the world, where he is literally, it's being thrown in his face. You can't waterbend, so you can't get this water. And the one thing he didn't want to address that's just happened to him immediately comes back up. And it just highlights like, what is his place in the world at this point? And he'd sort of forgotten about it because of the fight with Glowworm, the victory over Glowworm. But it's suddenly, thrown back up once again. And obviously, he does not deal with this well, but this is the moment where he snaps. And he just can't handle this being thrown in his face. And obviously, he basically massacres this town, gets his water, and this is where the big turn for the character comes. And we see the more, out for blood Yoon want for revenge. That's the only way he can think to end this. And it comes back to what was said. The thing he was thinking shortly after arriving in the spirit world was, this pain over what happens, I want to put it somewhere else, on someone else. And that's what he doubles down on. That's his sort of mantra at this point, is that how does he deal with the betrayal? By trying to put that pain into other people, the people who did that to him. And so it starts with these people who believe he's the Avatar and withhold water because he's not the Avatar. And obviously from there it continues into, he now has a list of people he's going to take out. The list of people who created this sequence of circumstances that causes him to be in this state right now. And top of that list is Jeonju. Also on that list is Liu Beifong, Heiran. And I think most interesting of all is that Kyoshi technically, I suppose, should be on the list, but she's not, because Yoon doesn't exactly know what way he should feel about Kyoshi, because he knows that they are or were friends. She didn't want to be the Avatar. She didn't make that decision herself. But he is not the Avatar, she is. That is a fact that cannot be denied. That she is, he isn't. And I like that in a way. It's Zoryu. It's Zoryu to Kyoshi is when this finally comes out in the book of, you are the one who he's truly, angry and upset at, because you may not mean it, the circumstances may be terrible, but fundamentally the reason he's not the Avatar is because you are, and he ultimately feels that you took it away from him. He's already taken his revenge on Jeonju at this point, by taking him out, and then realizes that, oh, I probably should have kept him until last. And that's quite interesting, just the way he kills Jeonju. It's so brutal and blunt, and just the way he did it. Like he even if you go back to the first book, you can tell like he enjoyed it, but like he reflecting on it, he wanted to relish that a lot more. And a lot of people bring up the idea of like, how did the character change so much from being this second coming of Karuk, potential to be a really good avatar, to being this assassin almost out for blood. And I think the reason for such a big character change is such a big betrayal. I don't think it can be understated how monumental Jeonju betraying him in the way he betrayed him was. That is one of the most devastating betrayals to a character I think I've ever kind of really seen in media. And it all just compounds with what happens from then on out, to where when he finally gets going again, all he wants is revenge. And again, I like the spirit world metaphor of that. It is that wound that can't close no matter what. That just before Kyoshi eventually goes to fight Yoon, she makes contact with Karuk, and one of the key things Karuk shows her is that, look, spirits can't control a person's actions. Everything Yoon is doing is him. And why is he doing what he's doing? What does that emotional rift that has not closed in all this time, what does that tell you about his actions? This betrayal by Jeonju, not being the Avatar anymore after being convinced for so long he was, it broke him. And there is not going to be any fix for that. You can't make him the Avatar. And it seems like he doesn't want to just live a normal life. He had what he wanted taken away from him and has settled on that's it. And I think you can see that from the way he responds to Kyoshi towards in the final fight, of like, when she says you need to let go, he is so hurt by the fact that she would even suggest that like, how dare you say that I can't be angry about this? And to a degree you understand that, because that is still Kyoshi not realizing you have to address that you are involved in this, that even though it's not your fault, you are the Avatar, he isn't, and that's why he's not the Avatar. And so when she finally apologizes to him for taking his avatarhood away from him, that is the thing that he finally lets his guard down over. That's the core issue that he's upset about. He's angry at Jeonju, but he's upset about the Avatar, and that's why I think it was such a perfect way for this fight to end, was Kyoshi to create an opening through emotion, and she tells the truth. It's 100% the truth, and it's what gives her her opening. And tragically, she has to use it to kill one of her best friends. And that's the situation Jeonju created. In that one moment of him wanting desperately to find out who is the Avatar, and the careless way that he threw Yoon away, ultimately created this situation where Yoon, who looked up to him so much, basically thought of him as his father figure, went on to take revenge and kill so many people, and then basically put Kyoshi on a path where she was really the only one capable of stopping him. And because of the way Yoon was, how powerful he was, it forced her into a situation where she had to kill him. So it's this deeply tragic thing of like a friend having to kill a friend, and her also having to be the one to bury him. And the only thing she can put on his grave marker is Yoon from Makapu. Because if she tried to put down his year of birth, she'd have to put her own name on his grave, because they typically measure the dates back then based off the era of the Avatar. And that would be so unfitting given the last stage of his life was to you know, almost like spit on his grave, that little bit extra, just by doubling down. He's dead, and on his marker it says, Yoon born, you know, died this day in the era of Kyoshi. No. So it's just this unfortunate thing of just this borderline barren grave marker for this character who started from nothing, got everything, and then had everything taken from him. And he's meant to be just this kind of deeply tragic character that you're like, oh, like, was there a potential for him to come back? Could they have somehow maybe convinced him to just come back and be their friend again? But the whole point of the character is ultimately that, no, this is meant to show sort of this impact that the identity of the Avatar can have, that if you give that to someone else without confirming it, look at what you can create. And this is why I think so many people are drawn to the idea of, like, what if the Avatar had a brother or sister? There'd have to be some jealousy there. Just on the fact that one member of the family is getting all the attention, one of them isn't. What happens there? And it's a similar type of dynamic here, in the sense that ultimately, you know, Kyoshi and Yoon both end up sort of, you know, living or working in the Avatar mansion. Kyoshi is the nothing person at that point. Yoon is the most, you know, important person in the world at that point. But when the twist comes in, she's suddenly the most important person and he has nothing. And that's what you created here. And it's all down to Jeonju as well. That, yes, Yoon had, you know, choices he could have made, but how devastating what happened to him. It's like, I appreciate them going for such a dark approach here of, yeah, the wound opened, emotional wound opened, but it never closed. There was no way to seal it. He tried to seal it by killing, but that just made it worse. And in the end, the only thing that could happen is being killed by his, you know, one of his best friends. And I think that's why the books work so well, is that arc for Yoon, that arc for Kyoshi, of that killing Yoon is the ultimate proof in the end that Kyoshi can do what needs to be done, even if who she needs to take out is someone she loves. And it's just very significant in that sense that, you know, there are these two tragic kind of events, you know, during her life, of like the people who died, the people she was forced to kill, and, you know, someone so close to her, previously thought to be the Avatar. She kills the fake Avatar here because he was such a threat. And there was really no talking him out of it at that point, because you wonder, like, oh, but like she had sort of gotten through to him. Maybe if she continued talking, something could have happened. But I think she realized from his response to the, you know, let go question, that if she didn't take that opportunity, there's no guarantee she would have been able to get through again. And he's so dangerous that she just had to take him out. And yeah, that's the tragedy of Yoon. He killed... He got ultimately the, I suppose, catharsis of killing the person who ultimately betrayed him, which was Jeonju, and, you know, Liu Beifong, I guess, heavily involved in the whole spreading of the knowledge of the Avatar situation. But, you know, still super tragic arc for the character, and it speaks to the idea of, like, how would things have gone if, like, he actually was the Avatar? And you think it would have gone actually quite well. You do wonder, like, maybe would Jeonju and the dark path he was going down, would that corruption maybe have spread a little bit to the Avatar? But ultimately the idea is, I think that combination of those two would have worked well to, you know, end a lot of what was going on in the world at that point. But that's not how it works out. And so, yeah, just the fact that this all comes down to pretty much Jeonju jumping on someone he thinks is the Avatar after 14 years of waiting to find the new Avatar. He jumps on something on the basis of his old friend Karuk. No one could play Paisho like he could. And so this boy has to be the new Avatar. That's why this all happens. And it's so interesting to look at it from those perspectives of just the early moments where this thing happened. But yeah, that's pretty much Yoon as a character. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on him, his character journey, his powers, abilities, everything about this, in my mind. Really, really interesting character. One of the highlights of the Shadow of Kyoshi and the Rise of Kyoshi. But yeah, let me know your comments on him in below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.